I was sitting at my desk when Karen from HR appeared at my door. "Quick meeting," she said. Not a question. The kind of tone that makes your stomach drop. 23 years I'd been with this company. 23 years of early mornings, late nights, and watching this place grow from 12 employees to 300. I knew every process, every system, every corner of this operation. "Conference room," Karen added. "They're waiting." I grabbed my phone and followed her down the hallway. The conference room had glass walls. I could see people inside. Too many people for a quick meeting. My manager wasn't there. Neither was Jim, who'd been VP of operations since I started. Instead, there were new faces. The leadership team that came in 6 months ago after the acquisition. Young, confident. The kind of confident that comes from not knowing what you don't know. This story is inspired by real-life submissions. Names and identifying details have been changed. I walked in. 12 people around the table. Some I recognized from my floor. Others I'd seen in passing. All of them watching me. "Have a seat," the new CEO said. His name was Brandon. Mid-30s, maybe. He didn't stand when I entered. I sat. "So," Brandon said, leaning back in his chair, "we've been reviewing departmental efficiency, looking at where we can optimize." That word, optimize, it never means anything good. "Your role has been flagged," he continued. "And we wanted to understand." He paused, glanced at his laptop. "What exactly it is you do here on a daily basis." The room was quiet. Someone coughed. I opened my mouth to answer, but he kept going. "Because from what we can see, a lot of your processes are, let's say, outdated. And at your age," he smiled, not kindly. "Well, she won't notice details anymore, right? That's just natural." A few people laughed. Small laughs, nervous laughs, but laughs. Karen sat in the corner, taking notes. She didn't look at me. "We need people who can keep up," Brendan said. "The future requires fresh minds. You understand?" I felt heat rising in my chest. Not anger, something colder. On the screen behind him, someone pulled up a presentation. Bold letters, compliance audit preparation. Below that, a date. 3 days from now, and below that, a list of processes under review. I leaned forward. One name caught my eye. Bank Reconciliation Protocol Original Account Setup. My hands went still. That protocol. I wrote that protocol. 20 years ago, when we opened our first business account at the downtown branch. I'd spent weeks building it, documenting every step, getting it notarized because our lawyer at the time said it might matter someday for liability protection. I'd kept a copy, a full binder, signatures, dates, official stamps. Not here in the office. Somewhere safer? "Any questions?" Brandon asked. I looked around the table. No one met my eyes except Jennifer, the junior accountant. She looked uncomfortable. "Why this audit?" I asked. "Why now?" "External compliance review," Karen said quickly. "Standard procedure. Who requested it?" Brandon smiled again. "The board. They want to make sure we're buttoned up before the investor meeting next quarter." Something didn't sit right. The timing, the rush. The fact that they were auditing a process none of these people had built. "Do they have all the documentation?" I asked. "We've provided everything," Karen said. But I knew they hadn't. Because the original documentation wasn't in the file room. It was in a safe deposit box. At that same bank branch? Under my name? Because I was the one who set it up. And suddenly, sitting in that glass-walled room with 12 people who thought I was irrelevant, I understood something. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me quiet. Brandon stood up. "I think we're done here. HR will follow up about next steps. You're welcome to take the rest of the day." I stayed seated for a moment. My pulse was steady. My hands were steady. I reached into my bag and touched the corner of an old envelope. The receipt from the safe deposit box. I'd renewed it every year for 2 decades. Force of habit. They were all standing now, gathering their things, ready to move on. I stood slowly, walked to the door. Then I stopped, turned back. "That protocol you're auditing," I said. My voice was calm. "Quiet? The bank reconciliation one? Do you know who created it?" Brandon looked at me like I'd asked him to explain quantum physics. "It's in the system," he said. "Is it?" The room went silent again. Different this time. "Because if it's not complete," I continued, "the audit won't pass. And if the audit doesn't pass before that investor meeting," I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Karen's pen stopped moving. Jennifer looked down at her laptop, typing something quickly. Brandon's smile had disappeared. I walked out, down the hallway, past the cubicles where people pretended not to watch, and I truly wondered if they had any idea what they'd just done. Because respect can be taken in a meeting. Dignity can be questioned in front of a crowd. But institutional knowledge, that doesn't disappear just because someone decides you're old. I got to my car, sat in the driver's seat, pulled out my phone. One unread email. From the external audit firm. Subject line: documentation requests urgent. I opened it. They were asking for the original notarized protocol file. The one that didn't exist in the company's system anymore. The one only I could authorize access to. I put the phone down, started the engine, and for the first time in 6 months, I smiled. The next morning, I arrived at my desk at 7:30. Same time I'd arrived for 23 years. My computer wouldn't let me log in. I tried 3 times. Each time, the same message. Access temporarily restricted, contact IT support. I picked up my phone and called the help desk. A young voice answered. "Oh yeah," he said. "I see the flag here. Says it's standard procedure for senior staff transitions. You know, so there's no confusion while things get sorted out." "Confusion," I repeated. "Yeah. Like, sometimes people at your level might accidentally delete things or, I don't know, get confused about new systems. It's just temporary." I thanked him and hung up. Temporary. I opened my email on my phone instead. One new message, sent at 6:45 this morning. From Karen in HR. Subject: document retrieval, urgent action required. I opened it. As part of our space optimization initiative, we're requesting that all senior staff members return any physical documents currently stored off-site. This includes files in personal storage, home offices, or external facilities. Please provide an inventory and return all materials within 48 hours. This will help us prepare for the upcoming compliance audit. 48 hours. 2 days before the audit. I read it again. Off-site storage. How did they know I had off-site storage? I looked around the office. People were arriving, dropping bags at desks, grabbing coffee. Everything normal. Everything the same. Except it wasn't. Because now I understood. This wasn't about space optimization. This was about making sure that 20-year-old protocol disappeared before anyone asked questions. I forwarded the email to my personal account. Then I deleted it from my work phone. At 9 o'clock, I walked down to accounting. Jennifer was at her desk, headphones in, focused on her screen. I knocked lightly on her cubicle wall. She looked up, pulled out one earbud. "Hey," I said. "Quick question. That audit prep meeting yesterday? Who requested the original documentation review?" She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "I don't know all the details, but I heard they brought in an external firm. Like, really fast. The board approved it 2 weeks ago, but nobody told us until last week." "What firm?" "Morrison and Associates. They specialize in acquisition compliance, making sure everything's clean before investors come in." I nodded slowly. And they asked for specific files. Yeah, Brandon's team sent them a list. But she hesitated. I was pulling files yesterday afternoon, and some of the stuff they're asking for isn't in the system. Like, the metadata says it existed, but the actual files are gone. Gone? Archived? Maybe? Or deleted during one of the server migrations. I flagged it to my supervisor, but he said not to worry about it. Said the summaries would be enough. Summaries. Not originals. I thanked her and walked back to my desk. At 11, my phone buzzed. Text message from a number I didn't recognize. This is Tom Chun. Mark from compliance gave me your number. Can we talk? It's not here. I stared at the message. Mark? I hadn't thought about Mark in months. He worked in compliance. Quiet guy, maybe 5 years older than me. He'd been around since the beginning too. I texted back. Coffee? Noon. Diner on 5th? Booth in the back. I grabbed my coat. The diner was half empty. Mark was already there, in the last booth, facing the door. He looked tired. I slid in across from him. They're cleaning house, he said. No greeting. You, me, Jim. Anyone who remembers how things actually worked. Jim's out. Retired. Last Friday. They gave him 72 hours. I felt something tighten in my chest. Jim had been planning to retire next year. On his terms? The audit's a setup, Mark continued. They want to streamline everything, make it look efficient for the investors. But they don't understand what they're streamlining. They're cutting out the foundation. The bank protocol, I said. He nodded. I was there when you built it. I was the one who walked it to the notary with you. That thing saved us during the IRS audit in 2009. Without it, we would have been destroyed. It's not in the system anymore. I know. I checked. Someone archived it 6 weeks ago. Right after the acquisition closed. Who? Can't trace it. But the authorization came from executive level. We sat in silence for a moment. A waitress refilled Mark's coffee. You still have the original? He asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. Because if you do, he said, they're going to come for it. And they're going to make it sound reasonable. Like you're holding up progress. Like you're confused. I looked out the window. Cars passing. People walking. Everything normal. I have it, I said finally. Mark exhaled. Then you need to decide. Give it to them and walk away clean. Or hold your ground and watch them realize they made a mistake. I thought about Brandon's smile yesterday. The laughter in that conference room. They think I won't notice, I said. Yeah, Mark said. They do. I finished my coffee. Stood up. Thanks for the heads up. One more thing, he said. The audit firm. They don't have the full picture. Brandon's team only sent them recent documentation. They don't know there's a 20-year trail. I walked back to my car. 48 hours, they'd said. I pulled out my phone and called the bank. I need to access my safe deposit box, I said. Of course. When would you like to come in? Today? The bank was quiet at 2 in the afternoon. Same branch where I'd opened that first business account 23 years ago. Different tellers, different manager, but the vault was the same. The woman at the desk checked my ID, pulled up my account, and led me downstairs. You've had this box for a long time, she said, making conversation. 20 years. Wow. Most people forget about them. I didn't forget. I renewed it every January. Paid the fee online. Some things you don't let go. She unlocked the gate, then used her key and mine to open box 447. She pulled it out and set it on the table in the private room. Take your time, she said, and left. I opened the lid. The binder was right there. Blue cover, 3 inches thick. The label on the spine, written in my handwriting. Bank Reconciliation Protocol. Original implementation 2005. I lifted it out. The plastic sleeves inside were still clear. Every page was there. The process I'd written, the sign-offs from our original CFO, the notary stamps, the addendum I'd added in 2007 when we expanded to 3 states. Everything. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Every page, every signature, every date stamp. Then I closed the binder and put it back. I didn't take it with me. Not yet. Because if they were watching, if they were tracking, I needed them to think I hadn't moved. I locked the box, went back upstairs, thanked the woman at the desk. "Will you need to come back soon?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "I'll call ahead." I drove home, uploaded the photos to 3 different cloud accounts, printed a full copy, and put it in a folder. Then I sat at my kitchen table and waited. At 4:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Rebecca Lawson," the voice said. "I'm calling from the legal department. We need to schedule a brief conversation about your employment transition." "I haven't resigned," I said. "Of course. But given the upcoming audit and the need for clarity, we thought it would be helpful to discuss your role going forward. Are you available tomorrow at 10? What's the meeting about?" "Just a formality. Making sure everyone's on the same page." I agreed and hung up. A formality. Nothing was ever just a formality. That night, I got an email from Morrison & Associates, the external audit firm. It was addressed to me directly. "C. Singh, Karen, and Brandon. We understand you were involved in the original implementation of the bank reconciliation protocol currently under review. We'd like to include your input in our assessment. However, given the timeline, we want to make sure we're not creating any undue stress. Would you be comfortable providing a written summary of your recollection, or would you prefer we proceed with the documentation already provided?" I read it 3 times. They were giving me an out, a polite way to step aside. Given the timeline, undue stress. Translation: We've been told you might not remember clearly. We don't want to put an older employee in an uncomfortable position. I didn't reply. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7:30. My computer access was still restricted. At 9:45, I walked to the legal department. Rebecca Lawson met me at the door. Mid-40s, sharp suit, kind smile. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. We sat in a small conference room. Just the 2 of us. "I want to be transparent with you," Rebecca said, opening a folder. "The company is going through a transition. We're very grateful for your years of service, but we also need to be realistic about where we are now." She slid a document across the table. "This is a voluntary retirement package. Very generous. Full benefits. Extended health care. A consultancy retainer for 6 months if you'd like to stay involved on a limited basis." I looked at the paper, but didn't touch it. "We think it's the best path forward," she continued. "Especially with the audit coming up. It's a lot of pressure. And frankly, at your stage of life, you should be resting, not stressing over compliance reviews." There it was again. My stage of life. "What happens if I don't sign?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. "Then we continue as planned. But I'll be honest, things might get complicated. The audit process can be intense. Questions about old procedures, documentation standards that have changed. It could reflect poorly if there are gaps. Gaps. In the records. In memory. These things happen over time." I sat back in my chair. The bank reconciliation protocol. The one Morrison & Associates is reviewing. Do you know who wrote it? I assume it was a team effort. It wasn't. I wrote it. Every word. And I had it notarized and filed because our lawyer at the time said it could protect us if anything ever went wrong. Rebecca's smile stayed in place, but something shifted in her eyes. "I'm sure your contributions are noted," she said carefully. "Are they? Because the version in your system is incomplete. It's missing the addendum, the one that explains how we handled the multi-state expansion. Without it, the protocol doesn't make sense. I'm sure we can locate you can't. Because it was archived 6 weeks ago? The room was very quiet. Rebecca closed the folder. I think we're getting off track. This meeting is really about your future, not about my future. Depends on whether that audit passes, I said. And that audit depends on documentation that you don't have. She stood up. I'll need to discuss this with the team. Why don't you take the rest of the day to think about the offer? I stood too. I don't need the rest of the day. I walked out. In the hallway, I saw Mark. He was coming out of another office, carrying a box. His desk cleared out. Our eyes met. He nodded once. A small nod. The kind that says, I told you. I went back to my desk. My restricted desk. At noon, I got a text from Jennifer in accounting. They're having an emergency meeting with the audit firm. Now. Conference room C. I walked past conference room C. The blinds were closed, but I could see shadows moving inside. I kept walking. The call came at 8 the next morning. I was still in my kitchen, drinking coffee. This is David Brennan from Morrison & Associates. The voice said, professional, clipped. I'm the lead auditor on your company's compliance review. Do you have a few minutes? Sure. We're trying to finalize our documentation review, and we've hit a snag. The bank reconciliation protocol, there seems to be a gap in the implementation timeline, specifically between 2005 and 2007. I said nothing. Your name appears on several internal memos from that period, he continued. But the actual procedural documentation is incomplete. We were hoping you might be able to clarify from memory what the process looked like back then. From memory. Why not use the original documentation? I asked. We've been provided with what's available in the current system. But given how long ago this was, and the various server migrations over the years, some details may have been lost. Lost? It happens. Technology changes. Files get corrupted or archived. It's nobody's fault. I took a sip of coffee. What specifically is missing? The addendum covering multi-state account reconciliation. There's a reference to it in the 2007 board minutes, but the actual document isn't in the file. That's a problem, I said. It is. Because without it, we can't verify that the current process meets the original compliance standards. Which means we can't sign off on this section of the audit. And if you can't sign off, he paused. Then the audit fails. The investor meeting gets delayed. The board has to explain why they can't demonstrate basic financial controls. I set my coffee down. When do you need the documentation? The final report is due in 48 hours. But honestly, at this point, I'm not sure the documentation exists anymore. Your legal team suggested we might be able to work around it if you could provide a detailed written summary. Something we could cite as institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge. That phrase again? Who suggested that? I asked. Rebecca Lawson. She mentioned you've been with the company a long time and might remember the details, even if the paperwork is gone. I smiled to myself. They wanted me to recreate it. From memory. So they could use my words without the legal protection of notarized documents? I'd need to think about it. I said. I understand. But time is really tight here. If you could have something to us by end of day, I'll let you know. I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Mark. Don't give them anything in writing. They'll use it against you. I texted back. What do you mean? If you write a summary and it doesn't match some other document they dig up later, they'll say your memory was faulty. Proof you were unreliable. Call me, I called. Mark answered on the first ring. Where are you? Home. Stay there. I'm coming over. He showed up 20 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. I got terminated yesterday, he said, stepping into my kitchen. Effective immediately. They said my position was redundant. Mark, listen. I've been digging. That audit firm? They were hired fast. Too fast? The board meeting where they approved it happened 48 hours after the acquisition closed. Someone wanted this review done before anyone had time to look closely at the records. Why? Because the new owners are flipping the company. They're going to clean it up, show growth, and sell it again in 2 years. But they need the books to look simple, modern. No complicated legacy processes that slow things down. I sat down at the table. So they're erasing the foundation. Exactly. And you're the only one left who knows what the foundation actually was. My phone rang again. The legal department. I let it go to voicemail. Mark leaned against the counter. That document you have? The original. It's notarized, right? Yes. And it's dated and signed by people who were officers of the company at the time. Yes. Then it's a legal record. They can't ignore it. But they can try to make you look like you're misremembering or being difficult. That's why they want you to write a summary. It gives them wiggle room. My voicemail notification popped up. I played it on speaker. Rebecca Lawson's voice, calm/measured. Hi, just following up on our conversation yesterday. I know David from Morrison reached out to you this morning. We really appreciate your willingness to help. I wanted to assure you that this isn't about doubting your memory. We absolutely value your institutional knowledge. We just want to make this process as easy as possible for everyone. If you're not comfortable providing written documentation, that's completely fine. We can work around it. But we do need to move forward with the audit, so we'll be proceeding with the materials we have. I'm sure you understand. Call me if you have any questions. Mark looked at me. You hear that? We'll be proceeding with the materials we have. They're going to file the audit without the addendum. Can they do that? They can try. But if an investor or regulator looks closely later and finds out a key document was missing, the audit firm gets sued. So does the company. And so does everyone who signed off on it, including the board. Including the board. I thought about Brandon in that conference room. His smile, his certainty. What do I do? I asked. Mark pulled out his phone. You document everything. Every call, every email, every meeting. You keep that original file secure. And you wait. Wait for what? For them to realize they need you more than you need them. He left a few minutes later. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I started a document, a timeline, every interaction since that meeting 4 days ago. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang again. Morrison and Associates. I answered, Hi, this is David again. I wanted to follow up. Have you had a chance to think about providing that written summary? I have, and I don't think a summary would be appropriate, I said. Not when the original documentation still exists. Silence on the other end. I'm sorry, he said slowly. Did you say the original documentation exists? Yes. Where? In a secure location, notarized, dated, complete. Another pause. Longer this time. Why wasn't this provided to us? He asked, and for the first time, his voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was tight. You'd have to ask the company that question. Can you provide it to us? I can. But I'd need authorization. From who? From the board. Because right now, I'm being told my memory is unreliable and my role is being transitioned. I'm not sure I have the authority to release company documents under those circumstances. I could hear him typing. I need to make some calls. Don't go anywhere. He hung up. I put the phone down and looked out my kitchen window. 23 years? 23 years of knowing exactly how things worked. Of keeping records. Of being thorough. They thought I wouldn't notice. Thought I wouldn't care. They were wrong on both counts. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. Emergency board meeting just got called. 1 hour. I smiled. The clock was ticking now. And it wasn't ticking for me anymore. The next morning, I woke up to an email sent at 6 p.m. from Brandon.Mitchell@company.com. Subject: Audit attendance update. After further discussion with our legal and audit teams, we've determined that your presence during the final audit review sessions may not be necessary. The process is moving quickly, and we want to make sure the room isn't too fast-paced for you to follow comfortably. We'll keep you updated on any outcomes that require your input. Thank you for understanding. Too fast-paced. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my personal email. At 8 o'clock, I called the bank. I need to access my safe deposit box, I told the woman who answered. Of course. When would you like to come in? This morning. As soon as possible. We open the vault at 9. I'll put you on the list. I was there at 8:50, waiting in my car. When the doors unlocked, I walked straight to the desk. The same woman from before greeted me. Back so soon? Need to check on something? She led me downstairs again. Same vault. Same box. But this time, I didn't just look. I took the binder out. I took photos of the deposit box registration, my name, the date I opened it, the renewal records showing continuous access for 20 years. I photographed the inside of the vault door, the box number, everything. Then I went back upstairs. Can I get a statement? I asked. Something that shows this box has been active and in my name since 2005? The woman nodded. Sure. Give me just a minute. She printed it out. Clean, official bank letterhead. My name. Box 447. Opened March 2005. Renewed annually. Current status. Active. I folded it and put it in my purse. Everything okay? She asked. Perfect, I said. I drove back home. Sat at my kitchen table. Opened my laptop. I pulled up the Morrison & Associates website and found David Brennan's direct email. I wrote carefully. Mr. Brennan, following up on our conversation yesterday, I can confirm that the original bank reconciliation protocol documentation, including the 2007 multi-state addendum, exists in complete form. It is notarized and stored in a secure facility with documented chain of custody dating back to 2005. I'm attaching verification of the storage location and continuous access records. However, I am currently unable to authorize release of company documentation without formal board approval, particularly given recent questions about my role and authority within the organization. I recommend you direct your documentation requests through the appropriate corporate channels. Best regards. I attach the bank statement. I attach photos of the box registration. Then I hit send. I sat back and waited. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. David Brennan. I just got your email, he said. His voice was different now. Sharper. You're telling me there's a complete notarized record of this protocol, and it's been in your personal custody for 20 years? Not personal custody. Secure custody. At the bank where the original business account was opened, and the company didn't provide this to us because you'd have to ask them. I heard him exhale. This is a problem. For who? For everyone. We can't file a compliance audit without complete documentation. If we file knowing that documentation exists but wasn't provided, we're liable. If the company knew about it and didn't disclose it, they're liable. And if this comes out later during an investor review, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. When's your deadline? I asked. Tomorrow? 5 p.m.? That's tight. Yeah, it is. He paused. I need to make some calls. Don't delete that email. He hung up. I poured more coffee. Sat by the window. An hour later, text from Jennifer. Board meeting right now. Conference room A. They pulled Brandon and Rebecca in. Nobody knows what's happening, but people are freaking out. I didn't respond. At 11:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. This is Gerald Hartwick. I'm on the board of directors. I believe we need to speak. His voice was older, measured. Not panicked, but not casual either. All right, I said. I've just been informed by our audit firm that critical documentation for our compliance review exists, but hasn't been provided to them. And that you're the custodian of this documentation? That's correct. Can you tell me why this wasn't flagged earlier? I wasn't asked. In fact, I was told my memory was unreliable and that I should consider retiring. Silence. He said finally. That's unfortunate. Yes. We need that documentation. The audit can't proceed without it. I understand. Can you provide it? I took a breath. Mr. Hartwick, 4 days ago I was humiliated in front of a room full of people and told I was too old to understand modern processes. Yesterday I was excluded from the audit review because the room might be too fast-paced for me. This morning I was advised my presence isn't necessary. So I need to ask under what authority am I now being asked to release company documentation? Another pause. Longer this time. You're right, he said. That's fair. Let me be clear. You are still an employee of this company. You have authority. And we need your help. What changed? We just learned that the audit we're relying on for our investor presentation may be invalid without your documentation, which means we've been operating under false assumptions about our own compliance status. Who made those assumptions? He didn't answer directly. Can you meet with me today? Just you and me? I'd like to understand what we're actually dealing with here. Where? My office. Downtown. 2 o'clock? I agreed. At 1:45, I pulled into the parking garage of a building I'd never been to. Executive offices. The kind with marble lobbies and security desks. Gerald Hartwick's assistant met me at the elevator, led me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Hartwick stood when I entered. 70, maybe older. Gray suit. Tired eyes. Thank you for coming, he said. Please, sit. I sat. He sat across from me, not behind his desk, like we were equals. I'm going to be direct, he said. I've been on this board for 8 years. I was here before the acquisition. I remember when you built that protocol. I looked at him. I remember, he continued, because I was the one who suggested we get it notarized. I was general counsel back then. I told you it might save us someday. The room felt very still. So, when I found out this morning that the documentation is missing from our files, and that you were being sidelined, I started asking questions. Uncomfortable questions. What did you find? That 6 weeks ago, during a system migration, several legacy files were archived. Not deleted archived, but effectively removed from active access. Who authorized that? Brandon's office. He said it was part of streamlining for the new ownership structure. Did he know what was in those files? Hartwick shook his head. I don't think he looked I think he assumed anything that old wasn't important. And now we have 72 hours until an investor meeting where we're supposed to demonstrate clean compliance. And we can't. Because the foundation of our financial controls is missing. He leaned forward. I need that documentation, he said. Not to protect Brandon. Not to protect the acquisition. To protect this company and everyone who still works there. I opened my purse. Pulled out the bank statement. Set it on the table. Box 447, I said. Downtown branch. In my name. Continuously maintained since March 2005. The complete protocol is there. Notarized. Dated. Every addendum, every signature. Hartwick picked up the statement. Read it. Set it down carefully. Why didn't you bring it in before? Because nobody asked. Because I was told I was confused. Because the narrative being built was that I couldn't be trusted. He nodded slowly. That was a mistake. Yes, it was. Can I access it? With my authorization? Which I'm willing to provide? To you? Not to Brandon. Hartwick stood. Walked to the window. Looked out at the city. I'm placing Brandon on administrative leave, he said. Effective immediately. Pending investigation into how this happened. And Rebecca. Her too. Anyone who participated in trying to push you out without due diligence? He turned back to me. I'd like to hire you as a compliance consultant. Temporary position? 6 months? You help us navigate this audit, document everything properly, and train someone to take over when you're actually ready to leave. On your terms. I didn't answer right away. And the humiliation? I asked quietly. I can't undo that. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. To you or anyone else. I stood up. I'll provide the documentation, I said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the downtown bank branch. Bring your legal team and the auditors. I'll authorize access to the box and you can verify everything on site. Hartwick extended his hand. I shook it. Thank you, he said. I walked out, got in my car, drove home. And for the first time in 5 days, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd won, but because the truth was about to do what truth always does. It was about to speak for itself. The call came at 7 the next morning. Brandon? I let it ring. Waited for the voicemail. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I don't know what you told Hartwick, but he's making decisions without understanding the full picture. Call me back. Please. Please. That was new. I deleted it. At 8:30, I drove to the bank. Hartwick was already there, standing near the entrance with 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman in a navy suit and a man with a briefcase. This is Sandra Yates, our corporate counsel, Hartwick said. And you've spoken with David Brennan from Morrison. David extended his hand. Thank you for doing this. We went inside. The bank manager met us, looked slightly confused by the group, but led us downstairs. I used my key. The manager used hers. Box 447 came out. I set it on the table and opened it. The binder sat inside, exactly where I'd left it. Sandra reached for it, then stopped. May I? I nodded. She lifted it out carefully, opened to the first page. Her eyes scanned the text, then moved to the notary stamp. March 2005, she said quietly. Signed by Robert Chun, CFO. Countersigned by Gerald Hartwick, General Counsel. Hartwick was standing behind her. I watched his face as she turned pages. There, he said, pointing. Page 14. That's the section on multi-state reconciliation. The addendum they couldn't find. David was taking notes. This matches the references in the 2007 board minutes. Date stamps align. Signatures are consistent. Sandra kept turning pages. Stopped at page 32. This clause here, she said. This is what protects the company from liability if account transfers happen without proper authorization. It requires dual signature and notarized verification. That's still in effect, David asked. Should be, Hartwick said. Unless someone changed it. They didn't change it, I said. They just stopped following it. The room went quiet. Sandra looked at me. What do you mean? Last year. 3 large transfers went through with single authorization. I flagged it. I was told the new system was faster and that dual signature slowed things down. Who told you that? Brandon. David closed his notebook. We need to pull those transfer records. Hartwick's jaw tightened. How large? 200,000 each. Sandra's face didn't change, but her hand stopped moving on the page. To where? Hartwick asked. Vendor accounts? Approved by Brandon's office? I assumed they'd been verified. Were they? I don't know. I was told not to worry about it. David looked at Hartwick. This changes the scope of the audit. If there are unauthorized transfers under a protocol that requires dual sign-off, then we have a bigger problem than missing documentation. Sandra finished. Hartwick stepped back, pulled out his phone, walked to the corner of the room. I could hear him talking quietly. Words like forensic and immediately and before the meeting. Sandra photographed every page of the binder. David verified each photo against his notes. When they finished, Sandra closed the binder and handed it back to me. "We'll need the original for the audit file," she said. "Can we take it with us?" "With a receipt," I said. "And a copy for my records?" "Of course." Hartwick came back. His face was gray. "I've called an emergency board meeting," he said. "Today, 3 o'clock. I need you there." "Why?" "Because you're the only one who can walk us through what should have happened versus what actually happened. Brandon will be there." "No. He's suspended. Rebecca too. This is board only. And you." We went back upstairs. Sandra drafted a receipt on bank letterhead. I signed. She signed. The bank manager witnessed it. I watched them leave with the binder I'd protected for 20 years. Then I went home and waited. At 2:45, I drove to the office. The boardroom was on the 10th floor. I'd never been up there before. Hartwick met me at the elevator. "Before we go in," he said, "I need to tell you something. We pulled the transfer records. Those 3 payments you flagged? The vendor accounts don't exist. The routing numbers trace to offshore accounts." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Brandon set them up." "We don't know yet. But they were authorized from his terminal. And they happened after the protocol was archived. So he knew. Maybe. Or maybe he just got sloppy. Either way, $600,000 left this company without proper oversight. Because the system that would have caught it was removed." He opened the boardroom door. 6 people sat around a table. All older, all watching me. Hartwick introduced me. I sat. For the next hour, I walked them through the protocol. How it was built, why each step mattered, what happened when steps were skipped. They asked questions. I answered. Then Sandra pulled up the transfer records on the screen. "These 3 transactions," she said. "If the protocol had been followed, would they have cleared?" "No," I said. "They would have been flagged at the dual signature stage. And when the routing numbers didn't match our verified vendor list, they would have been frozen." But they weren't. No, because the system that checks that was archived, and the person who would have flagged it, I stopped. "Was you?" Hartwick finished. One of the board members, a woman with white hair, leaned forward. "Why did you stay quiet?" she asked. Not unkindly, just direct. I didn't. I reported it. I was told it was handled. To who? Brandon. She sat back. Another board member, younger, spoke up. "So we're looking at potential fraud, enabled by removing the exact control that would have stopped it, and the person who built that control was pushed out right before an audit that would have exposed the gap." "That's what it looks like," Sandra said. The room was silent. Hartwick stood. "We're filing a formal investigation. The investor meeting is postponed. And we're implementing immediate financial controls until this is resolved." He looked at me. "I meant what I said yesterday. We need you. Not just for the audit. For the investigation? Will you help us?" I thought about that conference room. The laughter. Brandon's smile. "Yes," I said. "But on one condition. Name it. When this is over, you change the hiring practices. No more pushing people out because of age. No more assuming experience is confusion." Hartwick nodded. "Done." I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out knowing that sometimes justice doesn't come from fighting back. It comes from simply refusing to let the truth disappear. 3 days later, I walked back into the office building for the first time since the board meeting. My access card worked. My computer login worked. Everything that had been restricted was suddenly open again. I sat at my desk. It felt strange. Like visiting a place you used to live. At 9, Sandra Yates appeared at my door. "Morning? Ready? For what?" "War room." We're setting up a full forensic review. You're leading the protocol side. We took the elevator to the 8th floor. A conference room had been converted into an investigation center. Whiteboards covered 3 walls. Laptops everywhere. 2 people I didn't recognize were already working. "This is Marcus from IT Forensics," Sandra said. "And this is Linda. She's with our external fraud investigation team." Marcus looked up. "You're the one who built the original system." "Yes. Thank God. Because what they've done to it is a disaster." He pulled up a screen. "Look at this. Your dual signature requirement." Someone wrote an override into the code. "It's hidden in a system update from 4 months ago." I leaned closer. The code was clean, professional, deliberate. "Who wrote it?" I asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out. The commit log says it was routine maintenance. But routine maintenance doesn't disable fraud controls." Linda opened a folder. "We've traced the 3 transfers you flagged. The receiving accounts were opened 2 months before the first payment. All 3 link back to the same registration entity. A shell company in Delaware. Owned by. Still working on it. But the timing is interesting. The shell company was registered 1 week after the acquisition closed." Sandra sat down. "So someone knew the new ownership would create chaos. Knew they could slip things through during the transition. Or someone from the new ownership created the opportunity," Linda said. Marcus pulled up another screen. "There's more. 5 additional transfers. Smaller amounts. 50,000 each. Same pattern. Same offshore routing. All happened in the last 6 weeks." I felt my stomach turn. "That's 850,000 total." "Yeah." Sandra made a note. "The investor meeting would have happened next week. If the audit had passed, if no one had looked closely, these transfers would have been buried in quarterly reports. By the time anyone noticed, the money would be gone. And I would have been gone too," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. "That's why they wanted you out," Marcus said. "You're the only one who knew the system well enough to spot it." "Brandon knew that," Sandra added. "He's been here 6 months. Long enough to understand who held the institutional knowledge." Linda closed her folder. "We need to talk to him. Officially." "His lawyer won't let him talk," Sandra said. "Then we go around him. We pull every email, every login, every authorization he touched in the last 6 months." Marcus nodded. "Already started. Should have the full data dump by tomorrow." Sandra stood. "In the meantime, we need to document the original protocol. Every step, every control, so we can show exactly what was changed and when." She looked at me. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "How long? 2 days? Maybe 3? You have one?" I worked through lunch. Through dinner. Marcus brought me coffee at 8 p.m. "You don't have to do this all at once," he said. "Yes, I do. Because every day we wait is another day they could move money." He sat down. "Can I ask you something? Why did you keep that binder for 20 years?" I stopped typing. "Because my first boss told me something. He said, 'The work you do today might save someone tomorrow. But only if you write it down.' Smart man. He died in 2010. Heart attack at his desk." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "He'd be proud of you." I went back to typing. At midnight, I sent Sandra the documentation. 40 pages. Every control. Every checkpoint. Every place where the current system had been altered. I drove home. Slept for hours. Came back. Sandra was already in the war room with Linda and 2 people in suits I didn't recognize. "FBI?" Sandra said simply. "White-collar division." The taller agent extended his hand. "Agent Chun, thank you for your cooperation. This is federal now. Wire fraud across state lines." "Yeah, it's federal." He opened his laptop. "We've been monitoring those offshore accounts. They've been dormant since the last transfer 2 weeks ago. Whoever's running this is waiting. For what? For the investor meeting. Once the company gets the infusion of capital from new investors, they'll move the money. Make it look like normal operating expenses in the chaos of expansion. Can you stop them? If we can prove who's behind it before they move. Linda pulled up a chart. We've narrowed it down. The code changes were made from Brandon's terminal. The transfer authorizations came from his login. But what? His login was also accessed from an external IP address. Multiple times. Someone else was using his credentials. Sandra leaned forward. Who? We're tracing it. But it's routed through 3 different VPNs. Agent Chun closed his laptop. We need to move fast. If they realize we're investigating, they'll disappear the money and we'll never see it again. He looked at me. You said Brandon archived the protocol files 6 weeks ago? Did he have help? It would have done the actual work. Who? I thought back. Brandon brought in a contractor. Outside hire. Said he was upgrading systems for the new ownership. Marcus sat up. What was his name? I don't remember. I only met him once. What did he look like? Young? Maybe 30. Kept to himself. Marcus started typing. We'll pull the contractor logs. 10 minutes later, he had it. Kyle Morrison, contract IT specialist, started 2 days after the acquisition, ended 3 weeks ago, right after the last transfer, Linda said. Agent Chun was already on his phone. I need a location on Kyle Morrison. Last known address, credit cards, everything. We waited. 5 minutes later, he hung up. He's gone. Apartment vacated. Phone disconnected. Last credit card charge was at an airport in Miami 4 days ago. Sandra looked at me. Did Brandon know this guy before the acquisition? I don't know. Agent Chun stood. We need to bring Brandon in. Now. Before his lawyer shuts him down completely. He walked out, phone to his ear. The room was quiet. Marcus broke the silence. If Brandon coordinated this with an outside contractor, used his own credentials, and timed it with pushing you out, then this wasn't sloppy, I said. This was planned. Sandra nodded slowly. And you were the only thing standing in the way. I thought about that conference room. The humiliation. The calculated way he'd questioned my memory, my relevance. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. Remove the person who could spot the fraud. They almost got away with it, I said quietly. Almost, Sandra agreed. But they forgot one thing. What? That institutional knowledge doesn't disappear just because you want it to. My phone buzzed. Text from Hartwick. Brandon just turned himself in. Says he wants to make a deal. I showed it to Sandra. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A justice smile. Then let's see what he has to say. The interrogation room wasn't what I expected. Just a plain conference room on the 9th floor, glass walls covered with temporary blinds. Brandon sat at the table with his lawyer. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. I wasn't supposed to be there. But Hartwick had asked, and Agent Chun had allowed it. Sometimes seeing the person they hurt changes things, he'd said. I sat in the observation room next door, one-way glass. Sandra beside me. Hartwick standing behind us? Agent Chun started. Let's begin with Kyle Morrison. Brandon's lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Brandon spoke anyway. I met Kyle at a conference. Tech Security Summit in Austin. 2 years ago. Before I even worked here. And we stayed in touch. He was good with systems. Understanding weaknesses. I thought it was just professional conversation. When did it become more than that? Brandon looked down. After the acquisition, the new owners brought me in to streamline operations. Make the company more attractive for flipping. Kyle reached out. Said he could help. Said there were ways to optimize things that the old guard wouldn't understand. The old guard, Agent Chun repeated. You mean her? He gestured toward the glass. Toward me? Brandon didn't look up. Yes. What did Kyle propose? Small transfers? Hidden in vendor payments? Nothing that would trigger alerts. He said the system had gaps. Legacy processes that weren't being monitored. But they were being monitored. By someone who built those processes. That's why Brandon stopped. Why, what? His lawyer leaned in. My client is cooperating. But we need assurances. Keep talking, Agent Chun said. Then we'll see. Brandon took a breath. That's why Kyle said we needed to remove her. Not fire her. That would raise flags. But push her out. Make it look natural. Age her out. Make everyone think she was confused. Then archive the protocols she'd built so no one would know what to look for. I felt Sandra's hand on my arm. And the humiliation in the conference room? Agent Chun asked. That was Kyle's idea. He said we needed witnesses. People who would remember her as unreliable. So if questions came up later, no one would believe her. Hartwick made a sound behind me. Something between a curse and a sigh. How much did you take? Agent Chun asked. Kyle handled the transfers. I just authorized them. I thought it was $50,000 per quarter. Enough to be worth it, but small enough to hide. It was $850,000. 8 transfers over 6 months? Brandon's head snapped up. That's not what we agreed. He played you, Agent Chun said flatly. He used your credentials, your authority, and your desperation to strip this company. And you helped him do it because you wanted a quick payout before the next flip. Brandon's lawyer started to object, but Brandon waved him off. I need immunity, Brandon said. Full immunity. And I'll tell you everything. Where Kyle is, how he moved the money, all of it. Why would we give you immunity? Because Kyle's done this before. 3 other companies. Same pattern. He finds someone on the inside, exploits a transition period, and disappears. You want him or you want me? Agent Chun stood. I'll talk to the prosecutor. But understand if you're lying. If you're holding back anything, the deal disappears. I'm not. Agent Chun walked out. The room fell silent. I watched Brandon through the glass. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the chair. Sandra stood. Come on. We don't need to watch this. We went back to the war room. 20 minutes later, Agent Chun returned. He's giving us everything. Bank accounts, communication logs. Kyle's real name turns out Morrison was an alias. He's actually Kevin Mora, wanted in 2 other states for wire fraud. Will you catch him? Hartwick asked. We already did. Miami PD picked him up an hour ago trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. He had a laptop with the account access codes. Relief washed through the room. What about the money? Sandra asked. Frozen. All of it. The offshore banks are cooperating. You'll get most of it back. Most. He'd already moved $100,000 to crypto. That's gone. But $750 is recoverable. Hartwick sat down heavily. And Brandon, he'll plead guilty to conspiracy and wire fraud. Reduced sentence for cooperation. But he's done. He'll never work in corporate leadership again. Good, Hartwick said quietly. Agent Chun looked at me. You saved this company. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away. Saved felt too big. I just refused to let something important disappear. I just kept records. I said, no, Agent Chun said. You knew your worth, even when they tried to convince you otherwise. He shook my hand and left. The room emptied slowly. Sandra gathered files. Marcus shut down laptops. Hartwick stayed. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have been watching closer. Should have questioned Brandon's recommendations. Should have protected you. You couldn't have known. I should have known. That's what board oversight means. He pulled out an envelope. This is your formal consultant agreement. 6 months, full authority, and a seat at the table when we rebuild the compliance systems. I took it. What about the people who laughed? The ones in that conference room? Yes. Some are embarrassed. Some are angry at themselves. A few don't think they did anything wrong. He paused. But they all know now. They know what happens when you underestimate someone because of age. Because of assumptions. Is that enough? It has to be. Because I can't change what happened. I can only make sure it doesn't happen again. I opened the envelope. Read the terms. They were generous. More than generous. I'll sign it, I said. On one condition? Another one. We document everything. Every change we make. Every protocol we build. And we train people properly. So the next person who comes after me doesn't have to fight this battle? Hartwick smiled. Deal. I signed the agreement. He countersigned it. As I walked out, I passed the conference room where it had all started. The glass walls. The table where I'd been humiliated. Someone had put a new protocol manual on the table. The cover read, Financial Controls, an over-citrivized edition. Below that, in smaller print, authored by the Compliance Review Team, with foundational work by Senior Consultant. My name wasn't on it, but my work was, and somehow that felt right. Because this wasn't about credit. It was about making sure the next person had the tools to protect themselves. I went home that night and slept better than I had in months. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, methodical, built on the simple act of knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise. And sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply keep the receipts. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Hartwick. Can you come to the office? There's something you need to see. I dove in. It was early afternoon, the building quiet between lunch and the evening rush. Hartwick met me in the lobby. Board meeting just finished. Come with me. We took the elevator to the 10th floor. The boardroom. Inside, the full board was still assembled. 6 faces I recognized from the investigation. They stood when I entered. We wanted to do this properly, Hartwick said. With witnesses. He handed me a document. Official letterhead. Board resolution. I read it slowly. Effective immediately. The board acknowledges systemic failures and oversight that enabled fraud and created a hostile work environment. As part of our remediation efforts, we are implementing the following changes. Mandatory age discrimination training for all leadership, independent compliance oversight reporting directly to the board, and the establishment of the Institutional Knowledge Protection Program. I looked up. What's that last one? The woman with white hair, Margaret? I'd learned her name was Spogue. It's a formal program. Any employee with more than 15 years at the company gets protected status. They can't be terminated or forced into retirement without board review. And their documentation practices become part of the permanent corporate record. You're protecting experience, I said. We're protecting the company, Hartwick corrected. By protecting the people who built it. He handed me another document. This is your permanent appointment as Senior Compliance Advisor. Not a consultant. A permanent role. Part-time if you want. Full-time if you prefer. Your choice. Full benefits. And a formal apology, in writing, for what happened in that conference room. I looked at the paper. My hands weren't shaking, but something in my chest felt tight. The apology goes in your personnel file, Margaret added. And a copy goes to the SEC as part of our disclosure about the fraud investigation. So it's not just words. It's official record. I sat down, not because I needed to, but because the weight of it, the formal acknowledgement, was more than I'd expected. There's one more thing, Hartwick said. He pulled up a screen. An internal memo. Company-wide. This goes out today. It explains what happened. Not all the details, but enough. It names the fraud. It acknowledges the failure in leadership. And it credits UBI name with uncovering it and helping recover the funds. You don't have to do that, I said. Yes, we do. Because the people in this building need to understand. They need to see that speaking up matters. That institutional knowledge matters. That experience isn't something to be dismissed. Margaret leaned forward. Some of them won't like it. Some will say we're being too harsh on Brandon. But that's not your problem. That's ours. I read the memo on the screen. It was clear, direct. It didn't minimize what had happened. And at the bottom, in bold, we failed to protect a valued colleague. We allowed assumptions about age to cloud our judgment. We are committed to ensuring this never happens again. When does it go out? I asked. In 1 hour. We wanted you to see it first. I nodded slowly. Thank you. They left me alone in the boardroom. I stood at the window, looking out at the city. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer in accounting. Did you hear? Brandon's officially gone. And they're investigating Rebecca, too. People are talking. I didn't respond yet. Another text. This one from Mark. Just got a call from Hartwick. They're offering me a consulting role, too. Said they need people who remember how things actually worked. You did this. I smiled. A third text. Unknown number. This is David Brennan from Morrison & Associates. Our final audit report was accepted by the board this morning. Thank you for your cooperation and for keeping those records. You probably saved more than just this company. I put the phone away. At 4 o'clock, the memo went out. I watched from my desk as people read it. Some looked shocked. Some nodded like they'd suspected something. A few walked past my desk and caught my eye. Silent nods. Small acknowledgments. One woman stopped. Linda from accounting. Older, maybe 60. I read what you did, she said. Thank you. For showing them we're not invisible. She walked away before I could respond. At 5, I packed up my things. Not to leave for good. Just to go home. As I walked through the lobby, I saw something new. A plaque on the wall near the elevators. In recognition of 23 years of service and institutional leadership, integrity protects what efficiency cannot. My name was on it. Small, dignified. I stood there for a moment. People walked past. The building hummed with end-of-day energy. Someone had seen me. Really seen me. Not in spite of my age, but because of my experience. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat. My phone rang. Hartwick. Did you see the plaque? He asked. I did. Too much? No. It's right. Good. Because the board wants you to know what happened to you changed how we think about this company, about who builds it, who protects it. You didn't just save money. You saved culture. I didn't know what to say to that. Take the weekend, Hartwick said. Then come back Monday. We have work to do. What kind of work? The kind that matters. Training the next generation. Making sure they understand that the systems they inherit were built by people who cared. People who knew things. People like you. I hung up and drove home. That evening, I opened my laptop. I still had copies of everything. The protocols. The documentation. The 20 years of institutional knowledge that had almost been erased. I started a new document. A guide to protecting what you build. Not for the company. For anyone who might need it someday. For the next person who gets told they're too old, too slow, too confused. I wrote until midnight. Then I saved it. Backed it up in 3 places. Because the lesson wasn't just that I'd kept records. The lesson was that knowledge, real, deep-earned knowledge, doesn't expire. It becomes wisdom. And wisdom is the thing no system can replace. I turned off the computer and went to bed. And for the first time in months, I slept knowing I wasn't just valued. I was essential. Not because I'd fought back loudly, but because I'd simply refused to let the truth be forgotten. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing you can do. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same conference room where it had all started. But this time, I wasn't alone. 12 people sat around the table. Some were new hires. Some had been here for years. All of them were listening. The most important thing about building a system, I said, isn't making it efficient. It's making it accountable. Because efficiency without accountability is just a faster way to lose everything. A young woman in the back raised her hand. But what if the leadership doesn't want accountability? What if they want speed? Then you document anyway. You keep records. You make sure that when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, there's a trail that leads to the truth. I clicked to the next slide. The protocol I'd built 23 years ago. Updated now. Modernized. But still rooted in the same principle. Protect the foundation. This saved the company, I said. Not because it was complicated. Because it was thorough. Because someone, a long time ago, took the time to write things down. A man in the front row couldn't have been more than 30 spoke up. How did you know it would matter? I didn't, but my boss told me something once. He said the work you do today might save someone tomorrow. So I wrote it down. I got it notarized. I kept it safe. And 20 years later, when people tried to make it disappear, it was still there. The room was quiet. You're all here because this company wants to do better, I continued. They want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. That experience gets respected. That institutional knowledge gets protected. That's the culture we're building. Together. After the training ended, people lingered. Asked questions. Took notes. One woman, maybe 50, waited until everyone else had left. I was in that conference room, she said quietly. When Brandon humiliated you? I didn't say anything. I'm sorry. I looked at her. She met my eyes. I was scared, she continued. I thought if I spoke up, I'd be next. But watching what you did, how you didn't let them erase, it changed something for me. What changed? I stopped being quiet. I started documenting things. Asking questions. And last month, I caught an error in our vendor payments. Small thing. But it could have become a big thing. Did you report it? Yes. And they listened. Because of what you built? The culture you're creating? It's working. She shook my hand and left. I packed up my materials, closed my laptop. Hartwick appeared in the doorway. How'd it go? He asked. Good. They're listening. They are. Because they see what happens when people don't listen. He handed me an envelope. This came today. From the SEC, the investigation is officially closed. No penalties for the company, full recovery of funds, and a commendation for our cooperation. I opened it. Read the letter. At the bottom, a note. Special recognition to the employee whose diligence and documentation enabled the swift resolution of this matter. They didn't use my name, I said. They didn't have to. Everyone who matters knows. I folded the letter and put it in my bag. The board meeting is next week, Hartwick said. They want to present you with something. A formal recognition. Permanent place in the company history. I know you don't need it. But the company needs to give it. For everyone who comes after you. So they know that doing the right thing matters. That keeping records matters. That refusing to be erased matters. I nodded slowly. We walked out together. Through the office. Past cubicles where people were finishing their work. Past the plaque in the lobby with my name on it. You changed this place, Hartwick said as we reached the elevator. You know that. Right? I just kept the receipts. He smiled. Sometimes that's all it takes. I drove home. The evening was clear. The city lights were coming on. When I got inside, I made tea. Sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd planned everything 6 months ago. My phone buzzed. Text from Mark. Coffee tomorrow. Want to hear about the new systems they're building? And thank you again. For everything. I texted back, 10A.M. Same diner. Another text. Jennifer from accounting. Just got promoted to senior analyst. They said it's because I learned to document everything properly. You taught me that? Thank you. I smiled and put the phone down. The binder, the original one, was back in the safe deposit box. But I'd made copies, shared them with the right people, made sure the knowledge didn't live in just one place anymore. Because that was the real lesson. Not that I'd won. Not that justice had been served. But that institutional knowledge, real experience, the wisdom that comes from doing something well for a long time, it doesn't expire. It doesn't become irrelevant. It becomes the foundation that everything else is built on. And when people try to erase it, when they try to tell you you're too old, too slow, too confused, too matter, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Keep the records. Know your worth. Stand your ground. Not with anger, not with noise, but with the quiet certainty that comes from knowing you built something that matters. I finished my tea, looked out the window at the darkening sky. Respect can be taken in a meeting. Dignity can be questioned in front of a crowd. But knowledge, real, earned, protected knowledge, that's something no one can take away. I'd learned that the hard way. And now, 6 months later, I was teaching it to others. Not because I wanted recognition, but because the next person who sits in that conference room, the next person who gets told they don't matter anymore, needs to know something important. They're not alone. They're not invisible. And if they've done the work, if they've kept the records, if they know what they built, then they have power. The kind of power that doesn't shout. The kind that simply exists. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous power of all. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow, I'd train more people. Build more systems. Make sure the foundation held. Because that's what you do when you've been given a second chance. You make sure no one else has to fight the same battle alone. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever lived through something like this,